Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 18 team in my 2023 Deep Dive series. It's the Seattle Seahawks. Make sure to hit the like and the subscribe and leave a comment in the comment section below. Seattle was last year's probably the biggest surprise team that there was, led by Geno Smith, probably the breakout player of the year. They came back down to earth towards the end of the season, started to sort of look like they were more of the team we expected them to be. Slightly better. I think I had them as like a bottom 5 team in the league. I think a lot of people were expecting them to finish where they in that sort of range. And then they sort of slowed down towards the end of the year. Geno Smith still got paid big because he was frankly too good to let go of, I guess. So he got paid. He got a real opportunity there. Good for him. Pete Carroll continues to be one of the most resilient coaches, constantly figuring out ways to turn out positive results from a roster that people seem to doubt all the time. They did a great job in this draft, and last year's draft day, probably the best draft class, maybe in franchise history, at least for year one players. They got so many starters out of it, and this year, from my perspective, they got a starting wide receiver, Jackson Smith-Njigba. They got a starting center in Olu Oluwatimi, and they got a number one cornerback in Devon Witherspoon. So there's a lot of potential here. They brought back Bobby Wagner. They added Derek Hall, and I believe it was the second round edge rusher there. So he's going to get mixed into there with Boya Mafe, with Uchenna Nwosu, with Darrell Taylor. So they're going to have a good, healthy rotation on the edge there. I'm not sure they have truly a breakout star, but they certainly got a lot of potential there as well. And just from a overall team building perspective, they seem to be continuously on the right track. Now, what is it going to look like with Geno Smith in year 2 of this sort of breakout renaissance for him? Is he going to go back to maybe what we thought he was? Was this an outlier? Or is he really got these capabilities, and now with a true great receiving group, a really deep tight end room, and they drafted Zach Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh, which I think is sort of flying under the radar there a bit. Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker are going to be that 1-2 punch on first and second down. Then they got Kenny McIntosh, who's going to come in on those third downs and be a great receiving back option for them in this offense. So it's going to be a running back by committee. So fantasy football players, sorry. But Seattle Seahawks fans, with Walker, Charbonnet, and McIntosh. And then you got DJ Dallas, who sort of gets mixed in there a bit. He's sort of one of those guys who I would assume is a fan favorite. Not a lot of people outside the Seattle Seahawks seem to really covet him, but he seems to stay on the roster a lot. So there's just a lot of optimism, I think, for Seattle. And I also think that they're in a position where if things don't work out with Geno Smith, they could move on in next year's draft to another quarterback. So there is, optimism. I think that the optimism is always going to be there. I think they got a really good coaching staff. Not really a big name coaching staff, but Pete Carroll is such a great head coach that he sort of elevates the people around him. He's always sort of done that. So let's get into it right now with the coaching staff, and we'll talk about all the player grades as we go along, like always. So this is my number 10 coaching staff, and it's mostly because of, we got Pete Carroll. But this staff, I think, really proved who they were and how great that they were by how much they got out of this team just last year. I can't make it clear enough just how, let's talk about Shane Waldron. All right. Pete Carroll sort of leads the whole thing. He's a CEO style coach who does give a lot to his coordinator. So we'll start with the offense, Shane Waldron there on the left. He came over from the Rams. He was the passing game coordinator there, and he brought just an unbelievable scheme, strategy to this offense that made Geno Smith an actual real quarterback in the NFL. He had Rashad Penny, all of a sudden looked like he's a guy who could play. Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf both had really great years, but it was all really what he did with Geno. That is where he really, I think he should, if they can repeat, if they can get anywhere close to what they did in the previous previous season. Shane Waldron should be considered as one of the top head coaching candidates going into next season, just based upon what he was able to do here. Because if he can bring that out of Geno Smith, who people had dead in the water, he was the worst starting quarterback in the league going into last season at this time. There was just a lot of adversity that he was facing as an offensive coordinator. I think it was his first year as an offensive coordinator as well. No, it was his second season, actually. He had the 1 year with Russell Wilson. But it just can't be understated how great this offense was for a lot of the season. Now, there was the regression part that we did see. That was very obvious, where they sort of regressed back to being, they were a top offense for a lot of the year, and then they sort of regressed towards the middle, maybe a little bit on the bottom half at some points towards the end, and then eventually, they lost the playoff game, and they maybe overachieved last year, and there were certainly signs of that. How much was that on teams maybe figuring out the offense and the offensive strategy? I think that there was a lot of that going on as well. That's possible. So how Shane Waldron responds and how his staff responds and how he's able to get the players to respond is still yet to be determined. But I still think that just based on last year, that was fantastic work. And then there's Clint Hurt, who's, Pete Carroll's been more of a defensive guy, and Clint Hurt coming in, he was a defensive line coach before. And with what he got out of Jadeveon Clowney with the 16 tackles for loss, his real specialty seems to be the ability to get guys to play well on early downs. We got Jerron Reed in 2018, had a breakout year with him as the defensive line coach. You saw, guys over the years have breakout seasons as defensive linemen in general from him, like Lamar Houston, Willie Young, Pernell McPhee. So, and that was when he was in Chicago doing that. So you bring him in, and he's got a lot of work ahead of him. There's a couple defensive coordinators that are really like that. We talked about Brian Flores being in that situation in the Minnesota video. He's getting a lot of young talent together all at once. Between his top three cornerbacks this year, they have a combined 2 years of NFL experience. Devon Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen, and Kobe Bryant. Two of those guys were rookies last year. Devon Witherspoon was the 5th overall pick this year. Then you look at some of the guys on the defensive line. They just brought in Draymond Jones. He's going to have to figure out a way to scheme him up and get him in a position to sort of build off of what we saw in Denver, which was a lot of the tools starting to come through for Draymond Jones. Particularly in the passing game, what they're going to really have to work on is how he performs in the run game. But their base 3-4 formation that they're going to be running, Draymond's probably going to end up being more of a traditional 3-4 defensive end, perhaps. And then you got, some rookies like Derek Hall, who he's going to have to bring along. Boya Mafe, he's going to have to coach up, taking the next step, particularly in on third downs. Boya Mafe was much better as an early down guy, which was sort of spoke to Hurts' abilities in general, was developing them in that way. But then you look at Derek Hall, who needs development in that realm of his game. And Uchenna Nwosu was sort of like a hybrid linebacker. You look at him, I look at him kind of like a Kyle Van Noy more so than just a straight up edge rusher. So there's going to be real potential there for him to develop these guys in ways that they need development. If he can develop Derek Hall and Uchenna Nwosu the way he did Boya Mafe last year, there's a lot of potential for this defensive line group in general for it to be a real complete 3-down defensive front four, and with a really healthy rotation that you can not lose a lot of ability in the event that you have to give a guy a series or two off here or there, or the guys have to miss a game for whatever reason. And I think that he's established himself as being somebody who can really develop teams in that way. And I think that Pete Carroll's got almost like an old school mentality, building teams through the trenches is really important to how he likes to run his football teams. You see it with the way that they've drafted the last couple of years. They drafted 3 interior offensive linemen this year in the draft, if you include undrafted free agents, I think, with Bradford, Olatimi. And then they had Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas last year, they drafted and started right away. Then you look at on the defensive side, Boye Mafe was picked up. You saw Darrell Taylor get developed a lot too. So there was a lot of focus and a lot of care taken into that aspect of the game. And I think him having Hurt as his defensive coordinator is just a sign of wanting that to come along maybe a little bit faster on the defensive side of the ball. I think Charles Cross had a decent season. Abraham Lucas had a little bit of a better season for sure, but for rookie tackles, amazing. Expect them to take the next step this upcoming season. So I really like what this coaching staff does. I really like what this coaching staff brings. What I think of Pete Carroll personality-wise, I think is kind of irrelevant. I think he's a little bit of an asshole. I think he's a little bit of a whiner. So, but overall, I cannot take away from what they do ability-wise. Their resume speaks for themselves, and they're like a level below what you get out of Bill Belichick and the Patriots, where it's like they're always going to be in the mix, it seems, regardless of how bad the roster looks on paper. I just think that Pete Carroll's got a little bit more talent this year, obviously, than the Patriots do. So I think that there's a lot more. And then with the division they're in, with the Rams and the Cardinals being just absolute garbage, there's a lot of opportunity there for them to steal a majority of their divisional games, which is going to allow their record to look a lot better come season's end. So let's talk about the quarterback. It's Geno Smith. He gets a 75 grade. And that's basically because of what happened towards the end of the season. He just couldn't maintain a lot of the high-level play. He had really great moments throughout almost every game in the season. But he did show signs of maybe being closer to what we thought he was. I think he ended up establishing himself as maybe a top 20 quarterback in the NFL. I think that's for sure at this point, coming into this year at least. Now, how he maintains that, he's got a lot more weapons around him. The offense is definitely better skill-wise than he had last year. So there's a lot of potential here, a lot of optimism for Geno Smith to establish himself this late in his career as being like a top 15 guy. They got Drew Lock as the backup. They apparently really like Drew Lock, so that's someone to look out for. If Geno struggles the way that we expected him to last year, though I don't expect it, they seem to really love Drew Lock as well. So I think there's a lot. I just think that Geno, there's going to have to be a lot to go wrong for Geno, because he does bring a lot more than just his ability to throw the ball. I think his experience and then his ability to contribute in the running game, which Pete Carroll really loves, is an asset that Drew Lock just doesn't seem to have. I think the variety of weapons that they've given Geno is going to really open things up for him. I think playing with the level of confidence of, having a team commit to you the way they did last year when 31 other fan bases were laughing in their face, while the media was laughing in their face, while the media was saying, okay, well, this is just their bridge quarterback, maybe they should go get Baker Mayfield, and all that nonsense that turned out to be just nonsense was going on. To have them invest in him, that gives your quarterback a lot of confidence, and credit to Pete Carroll for doing that. And then for them to turn around and pay him, even though they have the 5th overall pick, and they could have easily traded up to number 1, taken Bryce Young, and let Geno walk and go somewhere else. They could have done that. They chose not to. They had the draft capital to do it. They could have traded the 5 pick. They could trade their other first-round pick, and I'm pretty sure Chicago would have been happy to take it and drafted 5 and 20 or whatever it was to go with the number 1 pick. They didn't do that. They said, no, we're going to pay Geno Smith, and we're going to focus on making the rest of the team better, and Geno Smith is going to be the championship quarterback for us. So that says a lot. That gives a lot of confidence to a player. And when you're that late in your career, having a team be that invested in you is just a really it's a good sign, I think, for Geno Smith. And you got to trust what this coaching staff, like I said earlier, does, because they're just such a smart staff, and they just know how to get the best out of all their players. And then they seem to have found Geno Smith to be the perfect guy for that system. And I do expect some level of success. I just think as an overall skill set that Geno is not there, right? If that makes sense. Now we're taking a look at the rushing threats here. And it starts with the two running backs. See Geno there. He gets an 83. He's one of the better running quarterbacks in the NFL. Though he's really established himself well as a pocket passer, he still has that threat there. He's still a great athlete. So those RPOs, read options and stuff, quarterback keeps are still going to be a threat out there that teams need to account for. But then you got this running back room, which I'm only showing two of them right now. Kenneth Walker gets an 85. Zach Charbonnet, the rookie, comes in to get an 83. Walker's a little bit of a better player, obviously, I think, in terms of turnaround, hand the ball off. Charbonnet's got a little bit more of that receiving game stuff going on. And then the guy that doesn't show up here is Kenny McIntosh, who we'll talk about in a bit. But having this 1-2 punch is going to be so valuable, so incredibly valuable. It's just if for nothing else, if not for nothing, if this passing game struggles, they're going to be able to very successfully shorten games to give them an opportunity to win, which is because I think they are up there with the best running back rooms in the entire league. Even if they do pick up an injury with Kenneth Walker again, there's a lot of there's just so much depth, because then you got Charbonnet who can come in. You're not really losing a lot. You got Kenny McIntosh, who's going to take over on third downs. We'll go to the third down things here. He's going to come in and immediately be one of the best receiving backs in the NFL. Just an unbelievable talent in that sense. And then, Zach Charbonnet's got a little bit of that going on there. DJ Dallas has a little bit of that going on there. Kenneth Walker hasn't really shown it. I think he's more of the first and second down back. First down back, second and medium, second and short back for you. And you got Zach Charbonnet who can come in, on those second and 10, second and longs. He can even come in on third and shorts and be somebody who you can, throw the screen past to, throw a swing past to, or just hand the ball off and hope he can get the short yardage to get the first down. So it'll keep defenses guessing. And then just have the change of pace guy like Kenny McIntosh out there. You are going to have the ability to use all four of your running backs quite effectively. And like I said, that doesn't do much for fantasy football. But what it does do is it does a lot for the overall offense and their success. It's going to make Geno Smith so much more comfortable. It's going to open up the play action game, which is going to have receivers running in a lot of single coverage opportunities. When you got a guy like DK Metcalf out there, you got a great route runner like Jackson Smith-Njigba. You got that, great possession receiver with that little bit of speed in Tyler Lockett. You have such a wide variety here that this running back room is really going to drive that and open up all these opportunities for these guys to really have continued success at other positions. So here are the receivers and the tight ends. Let's start with the tight ends. Will Dissly sort of positioned there as a starter. They do have Colby Parkinson and Noah Fant, who they're all kind of the same to me in terms of the overall that they can bring to the team. I think Noah Fant's going to bring you a lot more of just straight up receiver ability, while Dissly and Parkinson are going to be a little bit more well-rounded, I would say. I think Noah Fant does have an opportunity to potentially really break out as a star. However, even though he's not listed currently as like the number one tight end for me. Then you go to the wide receivers, DK Metcalf, he's a true number one. Tyler Lockett, I think, is sort of on the back end of his career, but then they bring in Jackson Smith-Njigba in the first round, who, while mixing it up in there, is going to give Tyler Lockett probably more opportunities than not to play closer to what his game is. And, Jackson Smith-Njigba come in, play in that slot role, let Lockett sort of isolate himself on the outside with Metcalf on the other side. There's just a lot of good mix and match of abilities and body types and skill sets that's really going to bring a great variety to this offense. It's really they've done a great job of having a mix of different talents. I think you see a lot of teams, they have a lot of guys that are the same. And it doesn't provide a lot of the variety. But now you don't really know what type of play calls they're going to come out with, what type of strategy they're going to come out with, just because of like DK, JSN alone. Like, that's a completely different skill set than what you're going to be getting anywhere else. And then you look at the depth pieces here, they don't have a lot of depth at the wide receiver room. I think that their depth is a little bit on the weaker end of, oops, drop that. And, but again, the tight ends, they got deep tight end rooms in there. I am concerned, though, if they do lose a wide receiver, they're not going to have the depth pieces in there. I think they can always bring someone in free agency. But that's where the cause for concern really comes from with this receiving room. So let's talk about this offensive line. And on its face, for the passing game, it seems like a lot of just average guys. But you have Charles Cross there and Abraham Lucas, the 2 tackles, 2 second-year tackles. You expect them to sort of take a next step up in their game. A little bit more experience. I think will do them well coming into the second year. Damian Lewis is sort of he is what he is, like a high floor, low ceiling guard who's going to give you a good little mix of pass blocking and run blocking. Really solid guy to have, I think, on the offensive line. The 2 newest additions, you see there, Evan Brown coming over from Detroit. He's sort of like a center/guard. And then Oluwatimi is the center they brought in from Michigan, who, being a later round pick, he's going to come in, but he's going to start right away, I think, at the center position. They don't really have a whole lot going on. Sort of like their wide receiver room, you can see here, not a lot of depth. They drafted Kendall Randolph and Anthony Bradford as well, 2 guards. I think Bradford's got more of an opportunity to start than Randolph. I think Bradford could have an opportunity to start at the right guard position depending on how that camp goes, but he's really got to develop in terms of his pass blocking. Phil Haynes and Joey Hunt are really the only, I wouldn't even call them good depth pieces. Like, Phil Haynes is closest to being the ability to start, considering the rest of the talent on the offensive line in terms of pass blocking. But there's not a lot going on here, and I think that, sort of like the wide receiver depth, is a cause for concern for this roster. And we turn it over to the run blocking, and this is where the 2 rookie tackles did not perform that great last year. I think Charles Cross really needs to come along as a run blocker. Damian Lewis gave you a little bit less there, but then you get upgrades for me in Oluwatimi and Evan Brown in terms of their run blocking ability. Abraham Lucas takes a little bit of a dip in the run blocking game as well. Second-year players, we'll see how they can continue to get acclimated to this offense, to the scheme, and improve on that ability of their game. But the real strength of these rookie tackles was always going to be their ability in the pass blocking game. So continuing to develop them run blocking wise should be a goal. And then when you look at the depth pieces, again, still not a whole lot going on there. Bradford is a decent enough run blocker coming in, but they just don't have the depth here on this offensive line. And that is very concerning. They got experience, Curhan and Joey Hunt and Haynes, there's some experienced guys out there, but I think, again, kind of like the wide receiver room, there is a cause for concern here if one of these starting 5, go down with injury. If, you got Oluwatimi out there who's a rookie, is he going to start? Is he going to come out and have the ability to start in week 1? You don't know, so might have to play a guy like Joey Hunt early on at center, or do you play the rookie Bradford at guard and slip Brown into center? I think there's still a lot of question marks that are related to the depth and the overall talent level for the offensive line. That really, I think, drags down the overall offensive grades early on in the season, at least. In the passing game, but if they keep the solid, passing game, running game with the starters, the projected starters, they're okay. They'll be okay. They got enough true talent level around them that they're going to make that offensive line's job a lot easier. The cause for concern is if you pick up an injury. So just a quick position summary here. You can see the skill positions very solid in the passing game. In the running game, the wide receiver blocking, you get a little bit of blocking out there. Jackson Smith-Njigba, quietly one of the better blocking wide receivers that were available in this draft as well, which really helped, I think, his draft stock and is really going to make him effective in this offense, give Tyler Lockett maybe more opportunities to rest and, recharge his batteries throughout games by having JSN be out there as a blocker as well. The tight end blocking is a cause for concern. They kind of got like middle of the pack guys there with Disley and Parkinson. And then, of course, the run blocking and the pass blocking, you can see it there. They're not the highest grades, and the depth is very poor. So there is that cause for concern for the offensive line and the wide receiver room that seem to be very top heavy and starter dependent, which is in a physical game like the NFL, especially with linemen and receivers, and you get those non-contact injuries and stuff, or linemen get rolled up on all the time. To not have that depth, I think, is where the red flags for this offense should start to appear. But overall, I think they're coming in with, a average to above average offense. 15th pass offense, 14th rush offense, 13th overall offense. So they're like middle of the pack in the pass, slightly above average in the rush offense, slightly above average in the total offense. And I think that's really all they need to have. I think the key for this offense is going to be to keep games short, use that running back room to its full maximum ability, and don't turn over the football. Don't make mistakes. Don't put your young defense in positions where they're having to play with short fields. I would much rather this offense play it really safe throughout almost all games, and on 3rd and 8 throw a 5-yard route and it get tackled a yard or two short, and then them punt it and have the other team start at the 20, rather than, Geno Smith start trying to force balls into tight windows to try and pick up these aggressive first downs. I think that if they start playing that way, that's where we'll start to see them struggle, because I'm not sure Geno has that ability, number one. And I think that's going to put the offensive line in a position where they're going to have to play outside of their current abilities. I think that at this time next year, you can maybe start to look into them being more of an aggressive offense that can take more chances. But I think that you have a team right now where if your offense just, plays safe, smart, game managing football, you could get back to where you were last year, where you're like on that edge of being a playoff team. They did get in last year. And I think that they're in the same position this year where, a 1-game swing will be the difference in them getting in or out. But this offense needs to make sure that they're not making mistakes. Now let's take a look at this pass rush, and it's an interesting group. You got Darrell Taylor and Uchenna Nwosu there on the outside, and then 2 new additions to the interior, I guess you can call it, in Draymond Jones and Mike Morris, the rookie out of Michigan, who I think that Morris, this is where he's going to get a lot of his work, is going to be on early downs, because I do think that him and Draymond Jones in the NFL are sort of in the same position-wise. Like Draymond Jones is sort of a 3-4 defensive end in base formation, and I think Mike Morris, based on his size, is also going to perhaps be that same guy. I think Draymond Jones has more ability to come in, play a 3 technique on these passing downs, or play like a little undersized interior 1 technique, and then let Morris play a 3. But I do think that there's a lot of similarities in how in their game. They're both kind of hybrid 4-3 defensive ends who are sort of Draymond Jones has almost always played in a 3-4 defense, so he's always been like a 3-4 defensive end type at like 290 pounds, I think he is, and Morris is coming in at around the same size. So it does create a weird dynamic for the pass rush. Darryl Taylor and Uchenna Nwosu as edge rushers. I think the ability to drop Uchenna Nwosu into coverage also is going to help out this pass rush, allow them to be a little bit more exotic. And you can also mix and match a lot too with some of the depth you have, because you got Derek Hall, who you just drafted, who's like a straight up third down, pin the ears back pass rusher right now. He's going to have to really develop this secondary part of his game on early downs. Tyreek Smith is sort of a all-purpose defensive end edge guy who I think you feel really comfortable with putting in any situation. Boya Mafe is, he's sort of the same as Tyreek Smith in terms of edge, but his game really developed as an early down player. Alton Robinson, I think, is sort of on the precipice of being cut. I think that there's just a lot. They've invested a lot recently. And with Darryl Taylor breaking out, I think that sort of put Alton Robinson on the outside looking in. And then you got the interior guys, Jerron Reed and Brian Monet are really the only other interior depth pieces that you could have, I think, on third down. Mario Edwards is just another... to me, he's like another Mike Morris, Draymond Jones type. I think he's a little bit more of a true 3-4 defensive end. So I think in base formations, he'll play that. And then I just don't see him getting a lot of third down work. And they drafted Cameron Young, who it's going to be close with that one. So now we're looking at the defensive line against the run. And these are sort of the top four guys that we'll see out there. Nwosu is, I think, going to be 1, 2, 3 down guy. And then we'll see on the opposite end of him, it'll be with Darryl Taylor and Boya Mafe, and then mixing in Derek Hall as well on the opposite side of him. And then when you get to these interior guys, I think that you're going to have Mario Edwards playing the 3-4 defensive end role. I think Draymond Jones will play that 3 technique. And then it's going to be a really like a toss-up as to who's going to end up being the nose tackle for that base 3-4 formation. Look at some of the depth pieces here. There's Tyreek Smith. He's really the only depth piece they have at the edge who can play on those early downs. So I think that we're going to see a good 4 guys playing opposite of Uchenna Nwosu throughout different situations of the game. And basically leaving it up to whoever ends up being the best of the best is the one that gets the most playing time. I think that's a really, really positive thing to have. Especially got Derek Hall, who's coming into the perfect situation. Darryl Taylor, getting to work under Clint Hunt as well, who's done a great job of developing guys on early downs that play the defensive end / outside linebacker edge rusher position. When it comes to finding that nose tackle, it's gonna be interesting to see who the 3 interior defensive linemen are for this football team. I expect Jerron Reed to get a lot of playing time, but is he gonna be the nose tackle? Who's the guy that comes in these situations in your base formations? I think that's something they really need to look more into and maybe get some better talent for that. Maybe they're just not valuing a true nose tackle position as much as other teams do, which I think is an appeal to the modern game. There's a lot more passing. So maybe you just want to get, guys who are around 300 pounds and who can sort of do it all and just get really strong linebacker play in the run game to sort of make up for that, which I think they did a good job of as we get to the linebackers next. So here are the linebackers, and Bobby Wagner, after taking a year off to go to the LA Rams and just completely crap the bed on that team, that whole team did, in general, comes back to Seattle, and he's going to be the 3-down linebacker here with a mix of who his partners in crime will be depending on the situation. I think in the passing game, Devin Bush coming over from Pittsburgh is going to be that guy, super athletic. You can use him in a couple different ways in the pass game, and I think it's going to be a real positive contributor in this defense. With the depth, Jordan Brooks, not great in the passing game. John Radigan is like the depth special teams guy. that you have. But like I was talking about with the nose tackle situation, you make up for that by having strong interior linebacker play in the run game. And Bobby Wagner is still playing like one of the best in that situation. He's always been really good in every aspect of the game. I think as his career has gone on, obviously the ground and pound, you sort of lose like the over athletic aspect of your game, but the way his mind works, his ability to anticipate where the runs are going to be, where the spaces are going to be for him to penetrate, to blow up plays in the backfield, that's all still there, and he still played really well last year in rushing situations. And then Jordan Brooks will come in probably and be the partner in crime on those early downs, just because that's not Devin Bush's game at all. Devin Bush is one of the worst early down linebackers, which is why his time in Pittsburgh did not continue. And John Radigan, he's just a sort of a special teams player anyway. But there's a lot of optimism with this linebacker group when you got a guy like Bobby Wagner back who's going to be able to be a coach on that field and also make up for a lot what is lacking on the interior defensive line in terms of the size. So you're going to be having running backs who you might be giving up 3 yards a carry, but it's going to be because Bobby Wagner and his football IQ being able to step up and really help out in that situation. And now we're looking at the real upside of this entire defense, which is the defensive back room. We'll start with their ability in pass coverage. Devon Witherspoon comes in, and he is immediately looking like a guy who's going to put the clamps on them. We talk about how great Sauce Gardner was last year. His teammate Tariq Woolen played really well in the passing game. Was sort of gave up some big plays at times, but also, he was quality for most of the year. And you expect him to clean up a lot of those issues that he had, especially now that he's probably not going to be expected to be the number one corner on the team. And there's a little bit more talent around him as well. So he'll be able to use his size and his athleticism a little bit more. And he, can pick up right where he left off with a lot of those athletic plays that he was making to make interceptions. Because when you get Devon Witherspoon, who, if he puts the clamps on guys, they're going to have to throw at Tariq Woolen. So that's going to be a real opportunity for him. Then you got Kobe Bryant, who's going to come in and be the slot guy again. They did bring in Julian Love from the Giants, who's sort of like a safety slash nickel guy. So I think he can get a lot of play in the dime as well. Then Jamal Adams, who is still your best safety. It's just, in pass coverage, he's always sort of been suspect. But if you can bring him down closer to the line of scrimmage on these passing downs, maybe he plays a linebacker role next to Bobby Wagner, and then you get Julian Love and one of these depth pieces like Quandre Diggs, who's still really good, who just ends up being like a third corner on passing downs. Quandre Diggs is sort of like Jamal Adams in the sense that you get more out of him on early downs. So I expect Quandre Diggs to play early downs. Maybe Julian Love is that early down nickel corner, perhaps. I think that's a real possibility. Mike Jackson, who had a pretty decent year last year, just didn't really grade out well. He did give up a lot of. He was a hot and cold prospect last year. Was Mike Jackson? They did bring in Jarek Reed, the rookie. Artie Burns is there as a depth piece as well. So there's a lot of. There's a lot. The upside is so good here. In this sense, and then even against the run, there's still a lot to look forward to as well. So in terms of run support, you still get quality out of Kobe Bryant and Devon Witherspoon. The concern is Tariq Woolen. Obviously, you hope that he can play maybe a little bit more aggressive in the run game this year. But you get Jamal Adams, who's fantastic in run support. Julian Love, who's, again, like I said, he's sort of like that hybrid safety. You can really put him anywhere, and you'll get decent, consistent play out of him. When you look at the depth in the cornerback room, Jarek Reed is much better as a tackler. Artie Burns, getting some good special teams work in there. Quandre Diggs, really good in run support. So I could see a scenario where maybe you end up with Witherspoon and Kobe Bryant on the outside, depending on what the matchups look like on early downs, depending on what team they're playing on that week. And then you have Julian Love playing in like that nickel role, or you bring down Jamal Adams into the box, and then you have Diggs and Love playing more traditional safety roles. I think that there's a lot of mixing and matching that you can see here. I think Clint Hunt's going to have a lot of fun drawing up plays for this defense to keep the quarterbacks and the offensive coordinators guessing as to what exactly it is they're going to do, because they have so many guys who are well-rounded enough that you can have them play a lot of different zones, match up differently in man coverage, blitzing. There's just a lot that has to be accounted for with this defense, despite the lack of experience and maybe immediate high-end talent overall. Here's the overall position summaries, and kind of like what we saw with the offensive line and the wide receiver room, this defense does suffer from a lack of overall depth. The starters, not a lot of concern with them in too many aspects of the game. It's when you get into the depth, the pass coverage depth in the cornerback room is not very good. Linebackers, same thing. Interior pass rush, same thing. Edge room, there's a lot to be desired in terms of depth pieces here. So Clint Hunt's going to have to really, in that way, elevate a lot of the depth pieces throughout training camp to get a healthy rotation of players in there, particularly in the front four. And then on the back end, he got a lot out of Mike Jackson last year, but you drafted Devon Witherspoon because you realized Mike Jackson wasn't enough. So, there is that issue looming over the Seattle franchise this year of they got some really exciting players that are going to be out there on the field, but they're the wrong injury to the wrong player could make an entire position group fall apart in a way that could really hurt this team. But this is what I mean. Overall, 10th best defense in the NFL for me. 14th pass defense, 11th rush defense. They get a lot of help off the edges in the run game and on the linebackers and in the secondary. And then the pass defense, they got a nice little balance going on. But again, for me, it's the depth pieces. 10th total defense, but if we were to rank depth, they might be closer to the bottom 5. So you really want to put some care into the depth pieces, into your second team players. Make sure that they're up to speed and that they can contribute. Because in the NFL, someone's always going to get hurt and someone's always going to have to step up. So, I think that's a legitimate concern. So we take a look at their schedule, and I got them going 8-9. Take a look at some of the wins we got here: Arizona, Tennessee, Washington. I got them sweeping Arizona, Carolina, the Rams. I got them sneaking a win against Baltimore. And then you look at the losses that they have. I have them splitting with the Rams, splitting with the Niners. Losing to Pittsburgh and Cleveland. One game, they could get swept by the 49ers. I don't think that would be completely out of reason. They could lose to Baltimore as well. Now they're 7-10. But they could sweep the Rams. They could steal that game against Pittsburgh as well. So there's a lot of mobility here. And like I said, sort of like with last year, one or two games swing their way, then boom, they're a playoff team. Especially in the NFC, where there's still so many question marks about the true quality and what the hierarchy even is in this conference outside of Philadelphia and San Francisco, and maybe Dallas as well. So there's a lot of opportunity here. And if they play smart football, there's no reason why they can't win 10 games based on their schedule, but there's also the potential that they could maybe only get 6 or 7 wins. So just the overall summary: 8-9, second in the division, pretty weak NFC West, 8th in the conference, again, a kind of weak conference, 18th in the league, 10th coaching staff, which really elevates everything else around them here for the 13th total offense, 10th total defense. There's just a lot of potential here, a lot, but I can't stress enough. I'm going to stress it again one more time. the depth is a giant concern for this roster. But when you have the 10th best coaching staff, maybe perhaps you can make up for that, which is why I think that there's still a lot of optimism for the Seattle Seahawks to, in short order, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but in short order, go back to being a true perennial Super Bowl contender every year. And there it is, my number 18 team, the Seattle Seahawks. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Help out with those algorithms. I want to know what you guys think. Is Seattle sort of going to be that middle-of-the-pack team again this year? Will they resort to what we thought they were last year? Are they going to regress? What do you think of Geno Smith? And is he long for this world in Seattle? Let me know. I want to hear your thoughts. And I will see you guys with the next video next time. We are almost at those playoff teams. We're on the fringe playoff teams. We're almost there. Hope you enjoy, and we'll see you next time.